The sun rose over the crystalline towers of Lithora, the alien kingdom renowned across the stars for its beauty and its rigid court etiquette. Light danced across the floating gardens, and the palace shimmered like a jewel. Inside the largest hall, the royal court gathered. Nobles from every corner of the kingdom assembled in colorful robes. Their eyes gleamed with curiosity, pride, and a touch of arrogance. At the center of the grand hall, Princess Lysera stood tall. Her presence was quiet but commanding. Today she carried not just herself but her child, an unusual child who seemed out of place among the noble aliens. The child's small frame held a strange mixture of alien features and something different. Something the court whispered about behind hands and fans. The nobles, as expected, had opinions. "Look at the child," a tall, thin noble whispered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Weak, small. Surely the princess has lost her mind to call it worthy of court attention? Or perhaps she has lost her judgment," another added, smirking. "Do you think it even knows how to speak properly?" Lysera felt a chill in her chest, but she held her head high. Her child, named Orion, looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. He did not understand the whispers, the looks, or the words meant to wound him. All he knew was the warmth of his mother's hand on his shoulder and the steady beat of her heart. "Do not speak of my child that way," Lysera said, her voice calm but firm. It cut through the whispers like a sharp blade. Some nobles flinched. Few dared to look her directly in the eyes, but most ignored her words. The court had long mocked her. They had mocked her as a child, whispered behind screens of light, and now they mocked the next generation. They did not fear her yet. Lysera took a deep breath. "Watch him closely," she said quietly to her aides. "See what he can do before you judge." Orion tilted his head, curious, as a small orb of energy hovered above his palm. It shimmered faintly, casting tiny rainbow streaks across the marble floor. The courtiers gasped. A noble raised a hand as if to grab it. "Don't touch my child," Lysera warned sharply. Her voice carried across the hall, echoing against the crystalline walls. The noble froze. Every eye turned toward her, and silence fell like a heavy cloak. No one had ever heard Lysera speak like that before. The princess, usually soft and measured, now radiated authority. There was a quiet power in her words, a warning that trembled with motherly love and unyielding strength. The court, for the first time, felt the weight of her presence. Whispers turned to uneasy murmurs. She is serious." Orion's little fingers flexed, and the orb expanded, glowing brighter for a moment. It was clear this child was no ordinary being. Yet to the court it was hard to see what he could do beyond a curious trick of light. "Stop this nonsense," one older noble barked, regaining some confidence. "You waste the court's time with meaningless displays. A child should not be meddling in affairs of state or showing off dangerous abilities." Lysera's eyes narrowed. She did not raise her voice, but the quiet tension in her gaze spoke volumes. "Dangerous. It is dangerous only to those who seek to harm him. And I will not allow anyone to do that. Not here, not in my presence, not in this palace." The words hung in the air. Some nobles laughed nervously, pretending it was a jest. Others looked down, avoiding her eyes as if recognizing the truth they could not yet admit. Orion, oblivious to the politics, giggled. He bounced lightly on his feet and focused again, sending the small orb spinning through the air like a tiny star. It weaved patterns across the hall, and a few of the younger nobles couldn't help but watch in awe. "What trickery is this?" whispered one, wide-eyed. "I have never seen anything like it." "Is it magic?" "Magic?" scoffed another. "No, it is unnatural. This child is not like us. Do you see those human traits? The curiosity, the quick thinking. Dangerous, if you ask me." Lysera's heart tightened. She had expected this. The court could not understand, not yet. But she also knew that Orion was learning fast. Already he could see patterns, understand energy, and react instinctively. Perhaps one day he would do far more than just spin an orb. A minor noble, impatient and cruel, stepped forward. "Your Highness, the child should not be here. It disrupts the dignity of the court. If you value your reputation, you will send it away. Otherwise, I fear the court's respect for you will crumble." Lysera's hand rested on Orion's shoulder. She lowered her voice so only the nobles closest could hear. "If anyone dares to harm him, I will not forgive. I will protect him even if it means standing against the entire court. Remember this." For a moment the hall was dead silent. The nobles dared not challenge her, not this time. Whispers continued, but with a new undercurrent, caution. Something had shifted. Orion tilted his head again, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. He did feel the protection in his mother's presence, a shield stronger than any force he had ever encountered. He trusted her completely. Lysera turned slightly, addressing the entire court. You will see what he is capable of. You will judge only after you witness it. Until then, I expect respect. For both of us. Some nobles bowed slightly, reluctant but aware of the princess's strength. Others exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they had underestimated her. Suddenly, the orb in Orion's hand pulsed brightly and shot upward, breaking into smaller, shimmering spheres that hovered around him. They followed his movements, reflecting light across the hall in brilliant patterns. A hush fell. Even the oldest nobles felt a pang of awe. They had mocked him, dismissed him, perhaps even hoped he would fail. But now, before their very eyes, the child was extraordinary. Lysera watched him with a mixture of pride and caution. She knew this was only the beginning. The court had judged too soon. They had mocked the future without seeing it. Do you see? She whispered quietly to herself. This is only the start. They will learn. They will respect him, or they will regret it. One brave young noble finally spoke up. Your Highness, the child is remarkable. His voice trembled, unsure whether to compliment or defend himself. Lysera nodded, eyes still on Orion. Yes, and he will grow even stronger. And anyone who tries to stop him or me will face consequences. The court murmured again, tension mixing with curiosity. For once there was no mockery. The princess had drawn a line and the nobles understood it. Orion looked up at Lysera, smiling. He did not fully understand the words or the politics, but he felt her resolve. He felt the strength that came from her protection, and instinctively he knew he would never let anyone hurt her, or him. As the grand hall settled into an uneasy silence, the whispers began to shift. Perhaps we judged too quickly, one noble muttered. Perhaps the princess was right. Perhaps this child is more than we ever imagined. Lysera's gaze softened slightly, though her hand remained on Orion's shoulder. Yes, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. He is more, and they will see it soon enough. The child's orb shimmered brightly, dancing around him in a playful display. The nobles could not ignore it, could not deny it. And in that moment, the first seeds of respect were planted. But in the shadows of the hall, a few of the older, more ambitious nobles whispered together. They had not forgotten their old grudges. They had not yet bowed fully. The princess's warning had shaken them, but only time would tell whether they would respect it or defy it. Lysera did not care for their schemes today. Today her child was safe. Today he had proven that even the smallest being could command attention. Today the court had learned some respect was earned not through title or birth, but through courage, strength, and unwavering resolve. And Lysera would ensure that Orion, the mocked and underestimated Omega, would grow to be a force the entire kingdom would never forget. The palace of Lithora never slept completely. Even in the quiet hours, servants whispered and nobles schemed. Princess Lysera returned to her private chambers with Orion, the child clutching her hand tightly. The earlier confrontation in the grand hall still echoed in her mind. Though the court had paused in awe, she knew that respect could be fleeting among those who preferred mockery over humility. Orion's small face was still bright with curiosity. "Mother, why did they look so strange?" he asked innocently. Lysera knelt beside him, holding his face gently in her hands. "Because some people cannot see what is special right away. They think small things are weak. They forget that courage and strength do not always show themselves immediately." Orion nodded, his eyes wide and thoughtful. He still did not understand the politics, but he understood her meaning in the way only a child could. That night, as the palace slept under the glow of the twin moons, Lysera began to teach him quietly. She took him to a hidden chamber filled with holographic maps and ancient training devices. Here there was no interference from the court, no judgment, only learning. "Orion," she said, guiding his hands over a small console, "you must learn to understand patterns, not just see them. You must think quickly, because some will try to take advantage of you. The world can be cruel, even here in the palace." Orion's small fingers moved over the controls. An orb of light appeared again, hovering above his palm. But this time, he directed it through a series of obstacles, guiding it carefully with precision. Lysera watched him closely. Even in practice, he was clever and fast. Meanwhile, in the court, whispers of discontent grew. The older nobles were not easily swayed by the princess's warning. They had long memories of mockery and arrogance. Some began planning quietly to undermine her. "Have you seen the child's tricks?" one whispered to another in the shadowed corridors. "Do you think these are mere illusions?" "Perhaps, but I will not bow to it. I will find a way to show it is nothing." "Yes," said the other, voice low and cautious. "The princess is clever, but the court is cleverer. We will watch, we will wait. If the child grows too strong, we must find its weakness." These words traveled through the palace like a hidden current, unseen but potent. Lysra knew of spies in her chambers, shadowy eyes that observed her training sessions with Orion. She did not flinch. Instead, she used the secrecy to her advantage. The next day, in the grand hall again, the court gathered for a discussion of trade with a neighboring system. Orion followed his mother, observing silently. He knew that the nobles were still uneasy. He felt their eyes on him, measuring, waiting, testing. Lysra moved quietly through the hall, holding his hand tightly. "Stay close to me," she whispered. "Do not be distracted," Orion nodded. He had already learned to notice patterns, to anticipate movement. Today he would practice quietly, unseen. As the trade envoys arrived, the court was busy with their arguments and negotiations. Orion wandered a few steps ahead, curious about a small device left unattended on a table. He reached out and instantly a soft hum filled the air. A small, delicate orb appeared above the device, inspecting it, shifting with intuitive precision. A few nearby nobles gasped quietly, unsure if it was magic, technology, or something else entirely. One reached forward to stop him. Lysra's voice cut sharply through the murmurs. "Do not touch my child." The noble froze. The words echoed across the hall again as if repeated from yesterday. Lysra's eyes, calm yet fierce, locked onto him. There was no hesitation. The court knew now that she meant every word. The orb spun around Orion's hand, then gently returned to the device without breaking it. The nobles stared in disbelief. The child had not harmed anything, yet the skill and control were undeniable. "Remarkable," whispered a younger noble. I did not expect such precision." "Perhaps the princess was right. Perhaps we underestimated him." Lysra smiled faintly, but she knew this respect was fragile. The older nobles would not admit it so easily. They would continue their quiet plotting. Later that evening, Lysra sat with Orion in the palace gardens, the glowing flora lighting their path. "You see, my child, some will not change easily. You must learn patience as well as strength. Use what you have wisely, or they will try to turn it against you." Orion watched a glowing flower shift its colors in response to his movement. "I want to be strong, mother. Like you." Lysra's eyes softened. "You are already strong. But strength alone is not enough. You must be clever, kind, and brave. Then no one can break you." Days passed and Orion's abilities grew. He began to solve problems that had puzzled the court engineers for months. He repaired small machines, understood patterns in alien technology, and demonstrated intelligence far beyond his age. The court took notice. A few young nobles, curious and cautious, began to approach him quietly, asking questions and testing his ideas. Orion answered them calmly, showing patience and insight. Slowly, whispers of admiration spread, but the older nobles remained wary. "Do you trust this child?" one muttered. "I see cleverness, yes, but can we trust it? Can we trust the princess?" Another replied, voice tight with resentment. "We have no choice. We must watch. Every move, every lesson, every action. If he grows too strong, we must know it before it is too late." Lysra, aware of their plots, did not fear them. She prepared Orion, teaching him not just abilities but also awareness. "See what they do, not just what they say," she instructed. "Observe, learn. Protect yourself without striking first. That is the wisdom of a leader." One evening, Orion's abilities revealed another surprise. A small energy surge that he had been practicing accidentally triggered an old security device in the palace. Alarms rang, lights flashed, and several nobles panicked. Lysra moved swiftly, shielding him. "Calm down," she said firmly. She adjusted Orion's control, guiding the energy safely back into the device. The nobles now watching were speechless. He managed to control it. One stammered. "Even the old systems respond to him." "Yes," Lysra said softly, almost to herself. "He will grow beyond what we expect, and I will be there to guide him." By now, the whispers in the court had begun to shift. The child who had once been mocked was now being watched with caution, curiosity, and even fear. Some began to wonder whether the princess had chosen wisely in raising him as she did, but a few ambitious nobles remained stubborn, refusing to bow in spirit, even if they bowed in posture. They plotted quietly, waiting for an opportunity to strike or at least to regain their sense of superiority. Lysera anticipated this. She did not speak openly about the court's plots, but she prepared Orion subtly, teaching him foresight, patience, and resilience. She knew that one day the court would test him, and when that day came, he would show them that strength was not just in size or status, but in intelligence, courage, and heart. One night, as Orion slept under a canopy of shimmering lights in their private chamber, Lysera watched over him, a mixture of pride and concern in her eyes. She knew the path ahead would be difficult. The court could be cruel, clever, and unyielding. But she also knew something far more important. Orion would not be broken. He would grow, learn, and one day even the nobles who had once mocked him would bow, not out of fear alone, but out of respect for the Omega they had failed to understand. Lysera's hand rested on his small shoulder. She whispered softly, "Remember, my child, the world may doubt you, but I will not. I will protect you, and you will show them what it truly means to be strong." The palace hummed quietly around them, unaware that history was quietly being shaped by a child once mocked, guided by a mother who would not allow fear or cruelty to rule their lives. The court, they would learn, was about to meet its first lesson in humility. The morning sun painted the crystalline towers of Lithora in golden light. The palace buzzed with energy as nobles prepared for a ceremonial inspection of the city's defenses. Princess Lysera and Orion walked through the corridors, the child's small hand firmly in hers. Orion's eyes sparkled with curiosity, taking in the polished floors, the glowing walls, and the hovering lights above. "Mother," he asked, "why do the nobles act like that? Some are still whispering about me." Lysera smiled faintly, her gaze steady. "Because some people fear what they do not understand, Orion. They mock the things they cannot control. But one day, they will see your worth. One day they will learn to respect you." Orion nodded, his small fingers tightening around hers. He had already learned many lessons, but today Lysera knew would test him in ways he had never imagined. The court gathered in the central hall, and the doors opened with a soft hum. A delegation from a neighboring system, the Varkari, entered. They were tall, armored beings with sharp, angular features, and their eyes glimmered with calculated curiosity. Their leader, a commanding figure with golden accents on his armor, stepped forward. "We come in peace," he said, voice deep and resonant. "But we also come to test the strength of this palace. We hear tales of unusual power within these walls." The nobles of Lithora stiffened. Some smiled politely, masking unease. Others whispered anxiously to each other. Lysera stepped forward, Orion close to her side. "We welcome visitors," she said calmly, "but no one here will be harmed. That is a promise." The Varkari leader's gaze swept over the court, lingering briefly on Orion. A flicker of recognition, perhaps suspicion, crossed his face. "Ah, so this is the child," he said quietly. "I have heard rumors. Let us see if the stories are true." Before anyone could react, a sudden movement startled the court. A small device the Varkari carried activated unexpectedly, sending a pulse of energy toward the assembly. The nobles panicked, stepping back. But Orion instinctively raised his hand. A sphere of energy formed, absorbing the pulse safely. Gasps echoed through the hall. The Varkari leader's eyes widened in surprise. "Interesting," he muttered. "Do not underestimate him," Lysera warned sharply. Her voice carried authority, and for a moment even the Varkari faltered. "He is under my protection." Orion's small body hummed with energy, his eyes focused, his hands steady. He guided the orb, neutralizing the device completely without harming anyone. The court, who had once mocked him, watched in stunned silence. One of the younger nobles whispered, He saved us." "Yes," another said, almost in disbelief. "The child. He is extraordinary." The Varkari leader nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Perhaps the tales were true. "But tell me, Princess, how far does this child's ability go?" Lysera's gaze hardened. "Far enough to protect those I care for. That is all you need to know." The Varkari smiled faintly, but it was not friendly. "Very well. But we have come to test the palace's defenses further." Orion's small form tensed. He had been learning, practicing, preparing for challenges, but this was different. The Varkari were not curious observers. They were assessing, testing, probing. Lysra knelt beside him. Stay calm, Orion. Watch, learn, and act wisely. Do not be afraid. I am here with you. The first challenge came swiftly. A squad of Varkari warriors activated their weapons, small but powerful energy pulses aimed at the palace gates. Some nobles screamed, retreating behind the protective barriers. But Orion stepped forward, small orb spinning above his hand. He directed the energy, absorbing it and dispersing it safely across the floor. The palace did not falter. The Varkari warriors, expecting easy chaos, faltered instead. Their tactics, precise as they were, could not predict the child's instinctive skill. Lysra watched him with pride. Her child was not only intelligent but fearless. He moved with purpose, guided by intuition and the lessons she had taught him. One young noble whispered, unable to hide admiration, "The princess was right." The child? He is more than we imagined. Orion's confidence grew with each pulse he redirected. A few of the Varkari tried to approach him, perhaps expecting him to panic. But Orion anticipated their movements, his orb spinning faster, creating a protective barrier that left the attackers unable to touch him. The Varkari leader's golden eyes narrowed. "Impressive," he said almost grudgingly. "This child is no ordinary being. Perhaps he is the Omega the rumors spoke of." Lysra's heart swelled with a mix of pride and caution. "Yes," she said quietly. "He is the Omega, and I will not allow anyone to harm him." Suddenly, one of the younger Varkari warriors slipped through the defenses, rushing toward the court. The nobles froze in panic. Lysra acted instinctively, stepping between the warrior and Orion. But before she could react further, Orion raised his hand, and a wave of energy extended from the orb. The warrior was gently lifted, immobilized, and then placed safely back on the floor, unharmed but stunned. The court gasped. Even the older nobles, the ones who had once mocked him, could not hide their amazement. He controlled them," whispered a noble, "without hurting anyone." Lysra nodded, her eyes on Orion. "Strength is not only in force. It is in control, courage, and wisdom. He has learned that well." The Varkari leader stepped forward, raising a hand in acknowledgement. "The child is remarkable. You have raised him well, princess. Perhaps we underestimated your kingdom." Lysra's gaze did not soften. "We are always prepared, and I protect my child above all else." The Varkari leader studied her, then slowly signaled his squad to withdraw. "This is enough for today. But remember, princess, not all challenges can be faced with skill alone. Some come with dangers you cannot anticipate." As they departed, the court was left in stunned silence. Nobles who had mocked Orion were now quiet, uncertain, and cautious. Some bowed to Lysra instinctively, acknowledging her authority and the child's power. Others whispered among themselves, plotting quietly, unwilling to admit defeat so openly. Lysra turned to Orion, her small hand still in hers. "You did well," she said softly. "You were brave, you were clever, and you protected those who could not protect themselves." Orion smiled, his eyes bright. "I was not afraid. I did what you taught me." "Yes," Lysra said, brushing his hair gently. "And that is why you will grow to be someone the world respects, not for birth or title, but for courage and wisdom." Today they began to understand that. But tomorrow there will be new tests. Always remember, think, act, and protect. The court slowly recovered from the shock of the day. Nobles whispered cautiously, acknowledging the child's extraordinary abilities. A few younger nobles approached Orion, asking questions, trying to learn. He answered them patiently, showing insight beyond his years. But the older nobles, the ones who had once mocked, were quiet. They did not yet bow fully in spirit. Some plotted still, seeking ways to challenge the child or even the princess herself. Lysra knew this. She did not fear it. She would continue to teach Orion, not only to use his abilities but to understand strategy, politics, and foresight. He would be prepared no matter the challenge. As the sun set over the crystalline towers, casting long shadows across the palace, Lysra and Orion stood in the gardens, watching the floating lights above. "One day," she whispered, "you will face more than tests from strangers. You will face those who do not wish to see you rise. But you will be ready, and I will always stand with you." Orion looked up at her, trusting completely, feeling the steady strength she radiated. "I will be ready, Mother," he said simply. And in that moment, the first real test had ended. The court had witnessed the child's abilities. The palace had survived, and Lysera's warning had been proven true. The Omega, once mocked, had begun to show the world that strength and intelligence could come in the smallest and most underestimated forms. The kingdom would never forget this day. And neither would the princess, who knew that this was only the beginning. The palace of Lithora was quieter than usual in the days following the encounter with the Varkari. Nobles moved carefully, whispering behind screens of light and casting cautious glances at the princess and her child. The once confident mockery had been replaced with curiosity, awe, and a touch of fear. Some whispered of the Omega, the child who had protected the palace, and others silently questioned their earlier arrogance. Princess Lysera walked through the gardens with Orion, whose small hand fit easily in hers. The floating plants glowed softly, reflecting the twin moons above. The air was calm, but Lysera knew better. Calm was often the first sign of plotting. "Mother," Orion asked, eyes bright, "why are some nobles looking at us strangely?" Lysera smiled faintly. "They are beginning to understand, Orion. They see now that strength is not always obvious. They may not say it openly, but they are learning to respect you." Orion nodded thoughtfully. "I want them to like me." Lysera chuckled softly. "Do not worry about being liked. Respect is more important than approval, and respect is earned, not given. You have already begun to earn it." Back in the grand hall, the court gathered for a meeting to discuss the recent Varkari visit. The older nobles who had once mocked Orion spoke carefully now, careful not to offend the princess or the child. "This child," one elder said quietly, "is unlike any we have seen. Perhaps he is truly the Omega." Another nodded, adding cautiously, "Yes, his intelligence, control, and courage, it cannot be denied. We must acknowledge it for the good of the kingdom." Lysera, present in the hall, observed them carefully. She did not respond immediately. She knew that humility could be taught through example, not words alone. She let the court speak, letting them realize the truth themselves. Orion, sitting quietly beside her, watched the nobles. He could sense the tension in the room, the uncertainty, the careful respect. But he also noticed the subtle plotting in the eyes of a few ambitious nobles who had yet to bow fully. Days passed, and Lysera began to introduce Orion to more responsibilities. He was small but clever and quick. He learned the ways of the court, observing patterns in conversations, noticing small details that even the older nobles missed. One afternoon, a diplomatic envoy arrived from a distant star system. They had come to request aid in a technical matter, an energy grid malfunction that had left their city vulnerable. The court assumed the child would be too young to contribute, but Lysera had other plans. "Orion," she said, "observe carefully. Then if you can, offer your help. Use your mind and your skills." The child approached the envoy's device, small hands moving deftly. Within minutes, he had identified the problem and corrected it with careful adjustments. The envoy watched in astonishment as a child so young had solved a problem that had puzzled experts for months. The court was stunned into silence. Whispers spread quickly. He actually fixed it." "Yes," a younger noble admitted reluctantly. "The princess was right. The child is extraordinary." Even some of the older nobles who had secretly hoped to see the child fail could not deny it. They bowed their heads slightly in acknowledgement, their pride softened by the undeniable truth. But not all were willing to surrender completely. A small group of ambitious nobles began to meet in secret, plotting ways to regain influence and undermine the princess and her child. They whispered of power, control, and the need to protect their status. Lysera knew of their schemes, though she did not confront them directly. Instead, she continued to teach Orion patience, strategy, and foresight. "Observe carefully," she said one evening, "and act only when necessary. Do not strike out of anger. Wait for the right moment and then show them your strength with wisdom, not force." Orion nodded. He was learning quickly, not only to use his abilities but also to understand people. He began to see patterns in behavior, noticing when someone spoke with honesty or deceit. The court's respect for him grew slowly, as they realized that the child's strength was not just in energy or intelligence but in courage, control, and quick thinking. Nobles who had once mocked him now sought guidance, subtly attempting to learn from him without appearing to bow. One evening, the palace held a banquet. Nobles from all over the kingdom gathered to celebrate the recent successes in diplomacy and defense. Orion sat beside Lysera, quietly observing the room. The nobles raised their glasses in polite acknowledgement, some openly admiring him, others carefully hiding their envy. During the banquet, a minor crisis occurred. A young noble accidentally activated a small security device, causing a minor energy surge. Panic spread among the guests, but Orion acted quickly. He raised his hands, creating a protective shield around the nobles. The energy was safely redirected, and no one was harmed. Gasps filled the hall. The older nobles who had once ridiculed him now looked at him with awe. They whispered among themselves, admitting quietly that they had underestimated him. Lysera watched him, pride and satisfaction in her eyes. She had known from the beginning that Orion was capable, but seeing the court recognize it was another victory. "You're growing stronger every day," she whispered to him. Orion smiled, small hands resting on the table. "I am learning from you, Mother. And from them too." "Yes," she said. "But always remember, true strength is not just in what you can do, but in knowing when to act and when to wait." The banquet ended with a ceremony, where the princess was formally recognized for her wisdom and guidance. The nobles who had once mocked her bowed in respect, acknowledging not just her authority but the child she had raised. Yet Lysera knew the court's humility was fragile. Some nobles would still seek opportunities to challenge her and Orion. She continued to prepare him, teaching not only energy control and intelligence but also diplomacy, strategy, and the understanding of human and alien behavior. In the quiet hours, she took Orion to the palace's highest terrace. The twin moons reflected in his eyes as he looked at the city below. "Mother," he asked softly, "will they ever stop plotting?" Lysera's gaze swept across the glowing towers. "Perhaps, but that is why you must be ready. Not just with strength, but with wisdom. They will test you, Orion, but you will be prepared. You will show them what it means to be courageous and clever." Orion nodded, feeling the weight of her words, but also a sense of excitement. He was learning, growing, and becoming more than the court had ever imagined. Back in the palace, the older nobles met in secret. They could not deny the child's abilities, nor the princess's wisdom. Still, their ambition drove them to seek ways to regain influence. They plotted cautiously, aware that any misstep could provoke the princess or the Omega. Lysera, aware of their whispers, remained calm. She did not need to strike first. She knew that patience and observation were powerful tools. Orion, under her guidance, would learn this as well. Over the following weeks, the court's attitude shifted gradually. Respect replaced mockery. Cautious admiration replaced whispered ridicule. Even the ambitious nobles, though secretly plotting, began to adjust their behavior in public. Orion's reputation grew not only among the nobles, but across the city. Citizens began to speak of the Omega, the child who had protected the palace and demonstrated courage, intelligence, and control beyond his years. Stories spread quietly at first, then more openly, praising the princess and her child. Lysera watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and foresight. She knew that this was only the beginning. One day, a greater challenge would come, testing not only Orion's abilities but the court's loyalty and understanding. And when that day arrived, the child who had once been mocked would stand tall, not only as the princess's son but as a force of wisdom, courage, and strength. The Omega, as the court had begun to call him, was ready to show the kingdom that even the smallest and most underestimated beings could shape the future. For now, though, the palace rested in a fragile peace. Nobles bowed in humility, whispering words of respect. Citizens spoke quietly of hope and admiration, and in the quiet of the gardens, Lysera and Orion trained, learned, and prepared for the day when the true measure of courage would be required. Lysera placed her hand gently on Orion's shoulder. "Remember, my child, strength is more than power. It is wisdom, courage, and patience. One day they will see your full potential, and when that day comes, they will bow, not out of fear, but out of respect." Orion nodded, understanding in the way only a child could.
"I will be ready, Mother."
"I will make them understand." The palace of Lithora shimmered under the light of 1,000 stars, casting reflections across its crystalline towers. For weeks, the court had adjusted to the Omega, the child who had grown from mocked curiosity to respected figure. Nobles now approached cautiously, some still plotting in silence, others quietly admiring. Yet Princess Lysera knew that the true test was yet to come. That day began like any other, but a shadow darkened the horizon. Scouts returned with urgent reports. A warlord from a distant system, known as Karvek the Conqueror, had set course for Lithora. His fleet was vast, bristling with weapons far more powerful than any the palace had faced before. The court trembled at the news, whispers spreading like wildfire. Lysera remained calm, kneeling beside Orion. "This is the moment we have prepared for, my child. They will test us with fire, but you have learned courage, wisdom, and control. Remember everything we practiced." Orion nodded, small hands clenched with determination. "I will protect everyone, Mother. I promise." The warlord's fleet appeared on the horizon, massive and menacing. Ships glinted with deadly precision, and energy pulses flared across the void as if announcing the arrival of doom. The court panicked, scrambling for defenses, while Lysera moved steadily toward the center of the palace with Orion at her side. "Mother," Orion whispered, "they are so many." Lysera placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not focus on their numbers. Focus on your mind, your instincts, your strength. That is what makes the Omega different." The first wave of attack began. Energy blasts rained down on the palace walls. Shields flared and pulsed, some faltering under the intensity. Nobles screamed, running for cover, but Orion stepped forward instinctively. A sphere of energy formed above his palm, expanding and deflecting the incoming blasts with precision and control. Lysera moved beside him, guiding his focus, though he no longer needed much direction. The child had learned to act instinctively, combining raw ability with clever thinking. He redirected energy pulses, neutralizing threats and protecting civilians in the palace gardens. The court, watching from behind reinforced barriers, was stunned. The child they had once mocked now orchestrated a defense that no adult had attempted. Whispers spread among them. "The Omega. He is leading the defense." Karvek's warlord fleet pressed harder. Drones descended, weapons aimed directly at the palace's central towers. The court faltered, unsure how to respond. Yet Orion anticipated the attacks, creating shields and guiding energy to deflect each strike. His small hands moved with astonishing speed and precision, and the glowing orb of power above him seemed to multiply, covering more of the palace than anyone thought possible. One ambitious noble, watching from behind a barrier, muttered in awe, "We mocked him. We underestimated the princess and the child. We were fools." Lysera, noticing him, said calmly, "It is not too late to recognize the truth. Respect is earned through courage and wisdom, not arrogance." Karvek, observing from his flagship, realized he had underestimated this small planet and its defenders. He sent a final strike, an enormous energy cannon aimed at the palace's central tower. Panic rippled through the court. There was no way to defend against it with conventional methods. Orion, sensing the danger, stepped forward. He concentrated, drawing energy from his orb and the surrounding crystalline structures of the palace. The air shimmered as a vast shield formed, encompassing the central tower. The energy blast struck, but instead of destroying the palace, it collided with the shield, dispersing safely into the surrounding gardens. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles were speechless. Even the most skeptical and plotting among them could not deny the child's power and intelligence. Lysera approached Orion, pride in her eyes. "You have done well, my child. But now we must show them more than defense. We must show strategy." Orion nodded. He released the stored energy strategically, guiding pulses toward Karvek's fleet. The warlord's ships faltered, unable to withstand the Omega's clever manipulations. One by one, they retreated, disoriented, and defeated, forced to recognize the skill and intelligence they faced. The court erupted in awe. Nobles who had once mocked now bowed deeply. Whispers of respect, admiration, and disbelief spread quickly. The Omega had not only defended the palace but had outsmarted a formidable enemy, showing courage, wisdom, and ingenuity beyond his years. Lysera raised her hand, signaling calm. Do not cheer yet, she said softly. There is more to this lesson. True respect comes not from fear alone, but from understanding. Let them see that even the smallest and underestimated can shape the world. Orion stepped forward, his glowing orb spinning gently above him. He moved among the nobles, not in anger, but in demonstration of control. Energy pulses moved around the hall, highlighting the child's cleverness and strategic thinking. The older nobles who had once plotted against him now looked on with reverence and humility. One whispered to another, "The princess warned us. We did not listen, but now we understand." Lysera smiled faintly. Yes, you understand. And you must carry this lesson forward. Strength is not measured only by power, but by courage, wisdom, and the heart to protect others. The court slowly, carefully approached and bowed, not out of fear, but out of respect. Even the ambitious nobles who had secretly hoped to regain influence could not deny the child's abilities. They acknowledged the Omega, and by extension the princess who had raised him with love, wisdom, and patience. Orion looked up at his mother, small hands still glowing faintly with energy. Mother, did we do it? Yes, my child, Lysera said softly. You have shown them what it means to be brave and wise, and now they respect you, not because they must, but because they have seen your true strength. The citizens of Lithora, hearing the news, began to celebrate quietly. Stories of the Omega and the princess spread through the city. People spoke of courage, intelligence, and protection, praising the child who had once been mocked but had now earned a place of respect and admiration. Lysera held Orion close. Remember, my child, this is only the beginning. Respect must be maintained with courage, wisdom, and patience. You have the ability to inspire, to lead, and to protect. Never forget that. Orion nodded, understanding in his small, bright eyes. I will remember, Mother. I will make them see that even small beings can do great things. As night fell, over the crystalline towers the palace glowed with a calm, quiet light. The court had learned humility, respect, and the truth about the Omega. Nobles who had once mocked bowed fully, pledging loyalty. Citizens spoke of hope and admiration. And the princess, standing beside her child, knew that the kingdom was entering a new era, an era where courage, intelligence, and heart mattered above arrogance and status. Lysera placed her hand gently on Orion's shoulder. You have done more than protect this palace, she whispered. You have taught them humility, respect, and courage. And that is a legacy that will last far longer than any battle. Orion smiled faintly, the glowing orb above his hand fading into a soft shimmer. I want to keep learning, Mother. I want to keep protecting them. Yes, Lysera said softly. And you will. Together, we will show the kingdom what it means to be strong, wise, and courageous. And one day, they will speak of the Omega and the princess with admiration, not mockery. The palace of Lithora rested in peace that night, but the story of the Omega had only begun. The court had bowed, respect had been earned, and the kingdom had seen that even the smallest and most underestimated beings could inspire greatness, protect their people, and change the course of history. Princess Lysera looked at her child, pride shining in her eyes. Remember, Orion, strength is more than power. It is wisdom, courage, and heart. And you, my child, have all three. Orion nodded, small hand still in hers, ready to face the future. The Omega had arrived, and the legacy of the princess and her child would echo across the stars.